This week on the video version of the business of tech, the menu board of options in the new world of work, data overload and why there's opportunity there, cybersecurity funding for law enforcement, the Pentagon gives up on JEDI, right to repair may come federally, Microsoft's cloud PC, next week. Oh, and Kaseya was attacked. All this and more. Hit that like and subscribe, and let's hit the stories. The biggest news of the IT services world over the weekend is the supply chain attack against MSP provider Kaseya. The company indicates it affects about 1,500 companies and reportedly around 70 managed services providers within that number, and the attackers are demanding $70 million in ransom, which they will provide a universal decryptor if paid in a lump sum. The Revel gang has been actively increasing ransoms to victims individually during the attack. Among the high-profile victims, a Swedish grocery store chain, a public broadcaster, schools, and a national railway system. Kaseya had been in the process of fixing the issue just as the ransomware gang attacked. The White House has called for U.S. intelligence agencies to probe into who was behind the attacks. CISA issued a warning as well. As of this recording, Kaseya is bringing their SaaS cloud online Tuesday afternoon and anticipates a patch for the on-premises version on Wednesday. Now, why do we care? I'm not going to go deeper on this today. There will likely need to be a bigger piece to cover all the implications for IT services providers. There are some initial items to care about. That universal decryptor was interesting to me. Revel were smart enough to understand multi-tenancy in the context of MSPs. I've often said that's a key attribute of a vendor looking at the space. Now it seems it's one for criminals that have figured that out too. Also of note, embedded in the FBI warning is that due to the scale, the FBI would not be able to follow up individually on every case. This should terrify providers. It's too big for them to help you, for whatever reasons. A new point to think about: how law enforcement should be funded. This hack got massive coverage, international spread, and Kaseya's own CEO was on Good Morning America. While SolarWinds was about espionage, this attack is about money. Now we put it in context. This is Kaseya's third breach I'm aware of, and it's not the first against a provider in the MSP space. While it's a huge one, it was also warned about by CISA, who had identified MSPs as a target. And I predict this will not be the last. So the question to care about: what to do differently? And arguably bigger impact than the previous story, Microsoft has warned about an active exploit against all versions of Windows. It targets the Windows Print Spooler with a vulnerability known as PrintNightmare. It can be mitigated by disabling the Print Spooler service either locally or via group policy. The CISA has already issued a notification on this issue. Microsoft has also warned of a critical .NET Core issue on code vulnerability in PowerShell 7. Customers are urged to install PowerShell 7.0.6 and 7.1.3 as soon as possible. Why do we care? There's a meme floating around that the fire of the Kaseya attack was bigger than the Microsoft one. The Kaseya one may feel bigger to IT services companies and might come with a greater active price tag, but the Microsoft one has a greater reach. We care not to be overly distracted by one incident or ignore another. The U.S. military has a guiding principle of being able to fight two wars at the same time. IT services providers should be asking themselves, how many fronts can I handle at the same time, and how do I prioritize? I didn't want to miss this one in the context of a day of cybersecurity. Quoting Vice. On Sunday, a woman who works in cybersecurity was headed to the beach and posted a selfie wearing a bikini on her Twitter feed. When she woke up hours later, after not checking Twitter for a while, she saw that someone was complaining about her posting a picture in underwear, even though her bio says she works in infosec. suggesting that what she did is unprofessional. Her response quickly went viral, prompting several women who also work in cybersecurity and a handful of men to come out in her support. Now, why do we care? There was a lot of great collaboration this weekend in regards to the Kaseya incident. That's to be applauded. I didn't want to miss this, however, that within the cybersecurity realm, right at the same time, was harassment of cybersecurity professionals. Right when we need them most. At a time when we're losing the cyber war, it should be a top priority to ensure there are as many warriors as possible, and they're made to feel welcome and included. Let's ponder that at the same time. One of the big topics to consider is the shifting work landscape, so let's review some of the latest details. Here's a new angle to prevent out of sight, out of mind remote workers. Synchrony Bank is telling employees they aren't allowed in the office more than 4 days a week. There's a disconnect between how much workers want to work from home, 46% of the time, so about 2.5 out of 5 days a week, and what employers are offering them, 21.3% of the time, so about 1 day a week, says Nicholas Bloom, a Stanford economist, based on his research. That's a challenge, too. Half, 53.4% of IT professionals say the ongoing management of remote and hybrid workers is one of their biggest challenges, according to a JumpCloud survey of SME IT decision makers. Those professionals are going to be on the move. Less than a third of tech workers plan to stay in their current role. A survey of 1,000 technology workers and 500 IT decision makers by careers platform CW Jobs found that just 29% of employees intend on staying with their current employer for the next 12 months, with the majority planning to make career or lifestyle changes as life opens up again. CW Jobs research found that 14% of tech workers would look for a new role at a different company, with others planning to establish their own business, 11%, go part-time, 11%, change locations, 11%, or become a contractor, 10%. 8% are contemplating leaving tech altogether. Some companies are coming up with creative ideas. Some have started giving the same day or a week off. LinkedIn gave its staff a week in April, and Bumble did that in June. Hootsuite has a week off planned in July, and Bristol Myers Squibb gave its employees 2 days of rest. Others are considering changing the schedule. The pandemic spotlighted working parents' tough job of juggling work and childcare, and one idea is to shorten workdays themselves to align with the school day's 3 p.m. end time. Adam Grant, an organizational psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School, writes in The Economist. Or maybe go to the 4-day work week. There are 4.5 times as many ZipRecruiter job postings mentioning 4-day work weeks now as there were in 2016, reports Bloomberg. But they only comprise 0.6% of all postings, so it's a small but growing trend. And out of Iceland, the 4-day work week is an overwhelming success. The Reykjavik City Council and the national government tried it and found productivity remained the same. And now 83% of Iceland's workforce has either moved to shorter hours for the same pay or will gain the right to, the researchers said. Workers reporting feeling less stressed and at risk of burnout and said their health and work-life balance had improved. They also reported having more time to spend with their families, do hobbies, and complete household chores. All of these changes and experiments are being done in a U.S. job market that has not regained the pre-recession level of employment per new data from the Labor Department. Now, lest we think it's all about things changing, Google has restarted their shuttle buses and their free food cafeteria. So some things are going back to the way they were. Now, why do we care? This is a bit of a menu board of potential ways to consider reforming the way you work. How much time in the office? Out of it? How many days are you open? When are you open? How will you support workers? Before becoming overwhelmed, remember that this is potentially a competitive advantage in a market where the worker holds the power. The labor market is tight and employees have options, and salary is not the only portion of a compensation plan. Free meals may have been enough before. Now they may just be an expectation. There's no single answer here, and that's the actual opportunity. Everyone is looking for the answer, when the answer is what works best for your organization and the kind of culture you want to build. Now assemble that from the available options. I'll have a side of fries with that. The Pentagon has canceled JEDI. With the shifting technology environment, it has become clear that the JEDI cloud contract, which has long been delayed, no longer meets the requirements to fill the DoD's capability gaps, a Pentagon spokesperson stated. Next up, a new cloud infrastructure contract with plans to solicit bids from Microsoft and Amazon. This new joint warfare cloud capability contract has many of the same services, and CNBC is reporting that the Defense Department believes only those two can deliver the necessary infrastructure, although they will do market research to see if they're right. Now, why do we care? This long-running drama on this show comes to an end with the inevitable restart of the process. The detail we care about? The Pentagon thinks there are only two companies that can deliver on their needs. Think about that. The U.S. Defense Department, they can't build this themselves. For every provider who thinks they can do it better, this is my argument back. The Pentagon knows even they can't build this level of capability. Want to ask, why do we care? T-shirts, stickers, water bottles, and even aprons. Pick up some of our great stuff at the link in the description below and support the show directly. Forrester says businesses are struggling with big data overload. The international study, unveiling data challenges affecting businesses around the world, found that 64% of businesses believe they are data-driven, but only 23% are prioritizing data's use across the organization. 2/3 say they need more data, and even more businesses state they have more data than they can handle right now. According to the research, 71% of respondents say they are gathering data faster than they can analyze and use it, yet 66% say they need more data than their current capabilities provide. Barracuda has released their MSP business report and highlights service expansion in 59% of respondents. Security and remote work continue to be highlighted as growth drivers, and that skilled worker problem will continue ongoing. Now, why do we care? Data like this is why I actually keep highlighting data management as a service to consider. Are you taking in the right data? Not too much, or being overloaded by it? Are you managing it well? Keeping access to the right people too? Layering in that security? A disjointed balance of we have too much data and not enough data says at the same time, and that tells you there's a problem and thus an opportunity. Playing in this conversation is a very different value level than playing down in the backups and patching world. Microsoft released an out-of-band update to that PrintNightmare issue discussed on Tuesday, which researchers say doesn't fully fix the problem. Threat actors are trying to capitalize on the ongoing Kaseya ransomware attack crisis by targeting potential victims in a spam campaign pushing Cobalt Strike payloads disguised as Kaseya VSA security updates. In that vein, Kaseya has not restored their cloud service, hitting setbacks that have pushed back the restart. The company has also pledged financial assistance to those MSPs that have been affected by the attack. The Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure posted in their blog this week that they had confidentially informed Kaseya of 7 vulnerabilities in April. Indications now are that the attacks led to ransomware on their VSA systems in less than 2 hours. Also of note, the ransomware demand has come down to $50 million, leading to some speculation that the REvil gang may have been a lot more successful than they planned for. The sprawl of the incident is too big. In all that noise about Kaseya, it would have been possible to miss the story of an attack on Cinex. They too were attacked, and one of the victims was the Republican National Committee. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service is suspected to be behind the attack. The Babook ransomware is back despite announcing their exit. They have a new version of their malware and a new leak site. In that context, the next web highlights 5 gangs to know: DarkSide, Revil, Clop, the Syrian Electronic Army, and Fin7. Names to know. Axios tried to rank the ransomware sizes, wondering if the Kaseya one was the largest in history. Turns out, it's hard to measure an attack as information changes over time. Variables include the number of victims, the estimated costs in losses of data and time, or the amount paid. And Western Digital is not having a good run, a third vulnerability in more of their devices. The Biden administration had Ann Neuberger, Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technology, deliver a message to the U.S. Conference of Mayors this week. The focus, the administration's efforts to fight ransomware. The message, be more proactive and meet with state-level officials to test cybersecurity posture. Also of note, the president has deemed the impact to U.S. businesses of the Kaseya attack as minimal, despite being concerning enough for personnel at key federal agencies to work through the holiday weekend. In that context, 1 in 4 employees say they still have access to accounts from past jobs, and nearly half of professionals share passwords, and a third say they write them down on paper. Now, why do we care? I'm working on a larger set of thoughts for IT services providers for an editorial that'll come out this weekend, but let's highlight something here. The administration is not wrong in terms of highlighting overall minimal damage, despite the wide-ranging hit in small businesses. In context of a national security breach, SolarWinds, or a run on fuel, Colonial Pipeline, the Kaseya incident is much more dispersed. Because it's spread across so many small companies, the impact is not felt in a single punch. The difference for me to highlight is that smaller companies can't write a check to make the pain go away the way a larger company or government can. As I highlight measuring financial incentives to determine action, remember that. The big can write checks, the small can't. Bit more data now on the state of hiring. Companies are holding on to their people. A new record low for layoffs and discharges in the new jobs data. The rate fell to 0.9% in May, a record dating back to 2001. Companies are planning to hire. A West Monroe executive poll indicates 77% of respondents plan to hire additional workers in the third quarter, and only 4% expect to do layoffs. Asked about the biggest challenges in hiring, 51% said not enough people with the right skill set, and hiring and retention of the workforce is the number one threat to their business at 49%. Cyber attacks were 13%. LinkedIn is reporting in its July workforce reports more about hiring too. Overall, hardware and networking hiring increased 3.3% year over year and jumped 2.7% month over month. Hiring in the software and IT services space increased 62.3% year over year and jumped 8.9% month over month. Now, why do we care? I think owners and managers should be hyper aware of the power individual workers have right now and be planning accordingly. This is more than salary. It's skills training, total compensation, quality of life, the works. Smaller companies have the ability to be agile here and know that investing in workers right now is not optional. Over-index here. It's a matter of survival and flourishing. Right to repair may be coming at the federal level. Bloomberg is reporting that President Biden will shortly be directing the Federal Trade Commission to draft regulations for empowering consumers. Farmers are expected to be the primary beneficiary, but the phone manufacturers are a possible target. Also on the legal front, multiple U.S. states have filed an antitrust suit against Google around the App Store, alleging monopoly power. This is the 4th antitrust lawsuit filed against Google by the U.S. government in the past year. Launching today is a campaign by the Communication Workers of America focused on 3 requirements to the broadband portion of the infrastructure package: prohibiting companies from interfering with union organizing who get federal funding, banning use of federal funds to hire subcontractors, and requiring companies to pay a prevailing wage. While I'm on policy, Newsweek has a piece on the funding for cybersecurity and law enforcement and asks the question, how is funding of police departments linked to cybersecurity when internal priorities, including officers, cars, and weapons, are competing for resources? Now, why do we care? Thematically, regulation is coming. In many ways, the trend here is to protect the small. Right to repair protects consumers, antitrust protects small developers, and the union campaign is about protecting workers from the large broadband companies. And that leaves the question, how do we finance that security? I apply a lens of protect people, not companies, in my thinking. It seems to align with the actions being taken. Something to look for next week. ZDNet is reporting that Microsoft's Cloud PC virtualization service will be announced next week at the company's annual Inspire Partner Conference. Now, why do we care? I'm super eager to see how this one turns out. In the context of thinking about securing endpoints, what if a customer could just have Microsoft do it? An old school MSP with their centralized vulnerable toolkit against Microsoft with their nation-state level security operation. Compare. Next week should be interesting. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSP Radio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech. I'll talk to you again next week.